What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me, as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for making this podcast your first listen for NBA coverage. Remember, you're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you think. You're on Apple Podcasts, you're on Spotify. Make sure you leave that 5-star review. You do that, we'll keep producing that content. On today's show, there's only one thing to talk about. A little bit late to the party here, but the trade has been finalized. Karl Anthony Towns is a New York Knick. Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo are Minnesota Timberwolves. Where do we
Most
start with this
importantly,
one?
Keita Bates-Diop is reunited with his first home in the NBA in Minnesota. Can't can't miss the important little details here. Just so you know.
I missed out too. And then also we have the Hornets. They made it work. The Hornets are the reason why this trade was able to go down, but
Yeah,
nothing too important that we need to
yeah. How
level
are you
off about them.
feeling? How are you feeling with the departure of Daquan Jeffries?
Oh man, heartbroken.
Heartbreaking. No, he had such a chance. Okay, let's start with the Knicks, man. Like I think they're. What's your first reaction? Let's start there. First reaction: positive, negative, excited, calm.
Love it and hate it right at the same time.
Let's start with the hate.
So yeah, I mean, it's just with Cat. I mean, I've always been such a big Cat fan, but then I'm also like, can he be the guy that we really need? Can he be healthy for a full year? The depth that we've lost now that we lose Donte and Julius Randle, that feels like it's leaving a big hole in our team. But there's just always that little bit of worry when a team is like willing to give up on a guy. But this is still a number one overall pick. This is still a guy who is a very, very capable offensive player, all NBA, all star level player. So as much as the hate is there, because I'm like, okay, ooh, our depth, okay, we're now all in. Okay, now we don't have any more flexibility. But then I'm also like, Cat is a really, really, really good player. And this could work as a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, like the first reactions, I think it's natural to think about that because depth is really what spurred on the season last year. I mean, it was Jalen Brunson, but it was also the next man up mentality. There's always someone ready to go. But it is a lot of banking on health on this team. Like Karl Anthony Towns doesn't have a perfectly clean track record. We already talked about Mitchell Robinson the other day. We know that OG has been a little bit here and there in terms of being healthy. Mikal Bridges, I mean, he's an Iron Man. Jalen Brunson is an Iron Man. Like you have insurance on your best players who are going to be, on the floor 70 games of the year. I'm not too worried about that. I guess the one thing we have to talk about is defense. 'Cause I think there's a lot about defense. There's a much ado about nothing, in my opinion. I think a lot has been maligned of Cat and how he plays defense, and there are some legitimate things to talk about. But let's just start there. Like, how are you feeling with the defense? I feel like a lot of people are thinking that this is going to affect, what they could look like defensively and questioning his ability as a rim protector.
I I think Cat can make. I'll say he can have a similar impact to Porzingis, maybe just to a lesser level because he's obviously not as tall and probably not as mobile as a defender. But Porzingis was never like, oh, a great defensive piece. But it was when he got to Boston, when he had those other pieces around him that allowed him to just play that role that he plays in the Celtic system on defense. It's not like if Porzingis was on, like he can't play like a Rudy Gobert role or an Anthony Davis role as a real defensive anchor just by themselves. That's not what Porzingis does, and that's not what Cat's able to do either. But with Hart, Bridges, OG Ananobi around him, I think maybe not to the same extent, maybe not to the elite level we saw Porzingis do it, but to a high enough level to be a plus defender and to keep this team close to a top 10 defense in the league.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you reeled you because I had to reel you in there for a second. I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying. People listening might not, but like, he's not gonna be Porzingis. Porzingis is absolutely like top tier, like game changing shot blocking. That when you put him at the four and he can free roam, that's like devastating, absolutely devastating. And Cat will not devastate teams. Cat will also, I think, not really take away a lot from this team either. Because if you look at the numbers when he was playing the five, Gobert's off the floor. Timberwolves still had a defensive rating the 91st percentile last year. That's him playing the five. And we also saw, just check the eye test. Look how they played against the Nuggets. Look how they played him with Jokic. I mean, he was a big part of why the Nuggets were not in the finals. He's the reason why they were able to advance past the Nuggets, because he's able to be a pest. And when he's not in foul trouble, I mean, which is always just going to be the biggest question, he provides a body that the Knicks wouldn't have. Like when you're playing Giannis, you're not going to stop Giannis. You just have to slow him down. When you're playing Embiid, you slow him down. And then you give time for help defenders to come in. And you had Gobert coming in for the T-Wolves. You had McDaniels coming in. But now you have guys like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby who, those are elite help defenders as well. They can come in, they can dig. They're not going to do the same shot blocking stuff. But I think there's so many things you can do with Cat as a post defender and as a presence there. Maybe not necessarily to the level of being a top 10% type of defender that Porzingis is. But let's look before they had Gobert. He had a 3.4% block rate. That was just above 80th percentile. That's not bad. And he's never been a bad defender. I think a lot of things stem from his reputation in college. Everyone expected him to be this elite, AD type defender. But that's just not who he was. Like, he never matured as a defender at the NBA level.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think that, like, this year, he's just going to be demanded to get back to the level that he was at in his first 4 seasons in the NBA. That's an area where I'm looking at it. Like, his first 4 seasons in the NBA, he played 323 of 328 games, 22 points per game, just under 12 rebounds per game, which would be top 5 over the last 3 seasons. He had 3 straight years over 12 rebounds per game, 1.5 blocks per game. Those are the kind of numbers that are going to be expected of him again this year. He's going to be expected to get back up and being a top level rebounder, especially on the defensive end while he's playing the 5. There's obviously the opportunity for him to possibly move to the 4 when and if Mitchell Robinson comes back. But the big kind of thing is, it's just going to be discipline and application. That's what's going to be demanded of Cat this year. The discipline. He can't get into foul trouble, especially stupid fouls on the offensive end, which Cat loves to do. That's a big problem with him. He is going to be expected to be more disciplined, and he's just going to be expected to apply himself on the defensive end more regularly. Like, we've seen great flashes of Cat as a defender recently, but we're going to need to see it a little bit more consistently now that he's playing in this New York Knicks team, and that's what Tibbs is going to demand that of him. They've worked together before. I think people are like, oh, it didn't work out before. Oh, it's going to be the same again. I don't think that's the case at all. So it's just going to be little things the Cat has to work on. It's not going to be anything major where he has to completely change his style or be this complete new player that we haven't seen before from him. It's just kind of getting back to the level that we know is there within him.
Yeah, there's parts of this trade where it's like there's going to be a lot of overthinking, which I've done my massive fair share of. But I think the reality is for Cat, coming from the situation he was in, there's going to be a lot different in terms of how the front court looks. But in terms of the kind of wing defense around him and the guards around him and what's expected of him defensively, things will shift a bit, but not a lot. Like, a lot of this is going to be copy and paste, to be honest. And again, we have a lot of evidence of what he looked like as a 5 on that T-Wolves team. And that was good. And it looked good. So what do we really think is the biggest impact here? I think it's got to be on the offensive end. And it's got to be for your star player, Jalen Brunson. He has never played with a big this good. Is that a hot take? I can't think of a pick and roll partner, pick and pop partner that he's ever had that is as good as Cat.
Porzingis? No, I'm kidding.
No,
no, you're absolutely right.
No. And dude, just that's where I think the conversation gets so fun as a Knicks fan and so terrifying for any other defense, because Jalen Brunson has just shown you that he is. I mean, it's him, it's Luka, and it's SGA, but he's there. He's the top 3, top 5 creator in the pick and roll, and it is just so hard to contain Jalen Brunson with his pace and everything we've seen him do. And when you add a guy like Cat, who's going to pull defenders from the basket, away from the play, but when you put him in the pick and roll, the way that he's able to finish the basket, the way if you try and switch on him, if you're putting bigger defenders on Jalen Brunson. You're like, all right, we'll just switch that. Then you know that Cat has done a great job punishing the switch and then playmaking out of the switch. So the way that things are going to go between those two playing on the offensive end, it's going to be fascinating to watch. Like the amount of points that they're going to be creating together. It's got to be, and this has to be bad juju now because we've said last year when we saw the trade between Dame and Giannis, we're like, oh, this is gonna be the best pick and roll pairing in the league. But I think truly this time, like they both match each other perfectly in what they're both trying to do, and I couldn't have thought of a better offensive fit for Brunson, the guy that you're investing, this next stage of Knicks history to pair him with.
Yeah, and like the like one of the most interesting things is like this like really feels like the Knicks are really kind of tilting towards offense over defense, even though they still have the capabilities to have a good defense, but like it's very like non-Tibbs. Like I think a lot of people are like, okay, the Knicks are gonna have to be a top three offense and maybe just hope that they can stay close to a top 10 defense. That's I think what a lot of people are thinking now that they've made this move for Cat. And I think that's probably fair, but I don't think it's I think people are exaggerating how negative he's going to impact the defense. But offensively, yeah, I think they are capable of matching any of these teams. The flow that's going to be there, they're going to be shooting a lot of threes. That's something I'm interested to see. Like Tibbs has slowly kind of bought into shooting more threes, and like, are we really just going to see them flinging the ball next year, like with Cat, with Bridges, with OG? Like it's going to be really interesting to see if they just completely buy into that. One thing I am a little bit worried about is the offensive rebounds. Obviously, a huge part of the Knicks game. That's a huge element where they can dominate. So Hartenstein and Robinson have averaged 7.4 offensive rebounds a game over the last 2 seasons. How can the Knicks cover for that? Because let's not forget, Cat's going to be out in the perimeter a lot. So he's not going to be just like right under the rim like Hartenstein and Robinson often were. So what sort of level are we going to be able to see in terms of that? And what sort of impact is that going to have? That's one area I'm interested to see how that plays out.
I have such a dumb casual like answer to that, but like if you're making shots, you don't have to offensive rebound. I don't know, like
Hey, let's
if
hope let's hope that's the
like,
offset of it. Yeah.
and I think that how much prettier does the offense look when you don't have Robinson under the basket, Hartenstein under the basket, hovering around looking to scoop up boards. And that like 5-out offense isn't something to do like all the time. And that's not something you have to do all the time because Cat is going to be an interior presence himself. And I think that emphasis given to him, and I think you saw what Achua can do. Achua is a great offensive rebounder as well. We know what we're going to get from Josh Hart, and you have enough energy from those two, I think, to at least bolster that a little bit. If you're still attacking the offensive boards, and if you are not getting a couple, three offensive rebounds a game because Cat's spreading the floor, and you just opened up wide open lanes for Bridges and Anunoby, for Brunson to create, like I think that's going to be something you sacrifice and you're okay with. You're going to be okay with getting less boards and creating a more open environment for Brunson to create and more space for your slashes to really get downhill.
Yeah. No, no, I totally agree. So let me ask you this then: are the New York Knicks better because they have effectively now this offseason they've gone about as all in as you can go. They have one pick left, and I don't even think it's their own. So are the New York Knicks better?
Like right, like after that trade.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I said the overthinking thing, I think a lot of people are overthinking the effects, and a lot of the I think the counter arguments are, well, they're not necessarily better. I think they're definitely better. They are definitely better. Randall's a fantastic player, and we're going to get into him in a minute when we're talking about his impact with the Wolves. He's a fantastic player, and Donte DiVincenzo, I he was undoubtedly a top tier 3-point shooter last year. One of the best 3-point shooters in the league, best volume shooters. Like, there's not a lot of guys who are going to do what he does, especially in the fast break. Not a lot of guys are pulling the way he was. But I think they sold high. I don't think that's quote necessarily an aberrant season. Like, he's never going to do that again. But I think that was his best season as a pro, and he's not necessarily a young player. And he, in this situation, had a ton of minutes because of injuries. and you're gonna replace him with Miles McBride, who I'm super high on. I'm very high on Deuce McBride. I think one effect of this trade and losing Donte is giving Miles McBride an opportunity to shine even more. And I think the more time he gave last year, the better he got. So I think in all, like I don't see a massive drop off from giving more minutes to Deuce from Donte. You get a little bit more playmaking out of him too. And then, I mean, Karl Anthony Towns is just a far better match for everything. There are so many questions of like how the Knicks can get creative to make Randle work on the floor. How he's going to work with the wings there. Is he just going to defer a little bit more? Is he going to play the five? Is he really going to commit defensively? Well, all those questions just got answered by Karl Anthony Towns. And no, he's not this elite defender. We know his deficiencies. We also know what he's good at, and it all fits. Everything makes sense now. There's not a lot of questions about fit, about how to fix the roster. So just all those things aside, they're obviously better. Like we don't have to have this. We can have complicated discussions about like what their rotation should look like. They have way more answers than they have questions in terms of why they should be one of the best teams in the league next year, especially with a completely finished roster.
Yeah, like it's very interesting that like we were having conversations throughout this year about potential of Randle playing small ball five, and everyone's kind of like, no, that's really not Tibbs' style. I can't really see him committing to that. And now we see him go out and make a trade for a legit number five, which is obviously very interesting. Like just shows that it really wasn't his style. And also, I'd get the feeling with Julius Randle that the Knicks knew that they weren't going to get him on a discounted deal, and that was kind of always a reason to trade him, unless he was going to be sign a team friendly deal, like Brunson, like most of us are expecting Bridges to sign in I think next summer when he's eligible for a 4-year extension. I don't think Randall was going to do that. And then there's also the little bit of a question mark of how he's going to fit within this team. So I think you're right in terms of Donte selling high. I think that's true, but obviously really hurts going into this season not having Hartenstein and Donte DiVincenzo, because even though they weren't our stars last year, they were such a big part of everything that we do. So it hurts a bit losing both of those guys going into next year. But on the whole, I think they are a better team. I think I quietly like this better than if we had given up Randall and Mitch. I know that that's come out that was the original package, just Randall and Mitch. Then they changed it to Donte, and then ultimately they added the first round pick to get the deal done. I kind of like the fact that we still have Mitchell Robinson to play certain minutes. Hopefully he's healthy come playoff time, and when we're going up against a Giannis or an Embiid, we're going to need Mitchell Robinson in there alongside Cat.
Exactly.
So I'm kind of happy that that package wasn't to the Wolves' liking, and we were able to keep him alongside having Towns in there.
Yeah, because that's specifically just on that specific point, man. I'm glad you said it because I was going to say it. Fast forward, I can't do math. 8 months from now, 7 months from now, we're in the playoffs. So I don't know.
That's 7 months.
Yeah. Okay, cool. But Bucks matchup, you got Lopez, you got Giannis, or you're looking at 76ers. You got to handle Embiid out there. We have an exact replica of how to play defense against a dominant big in the post with how we saw them play the Nuggets. Exact replica. And you're just going to see so many YouTube videos out there of people posting tape of Cat holding down the fort against Jokic, and then Gobert kind of hiding out on the wings and playing help defense, and how much of that they're going to be able to do, not just with Anunoby there, but especially with Mitchell Robinson. They can play too big. And putting two bigs out there in those situations, I mean, that's going to be a massive opportunity for them to really elevate their game in the playoffs. And that's a huge boon. So hopefully Mitchell Robinson, he has time. Just get healthy. That's something you're going to need, more so in the playoffs, and you'll deal with the offensive look later. But that is something that really excites me because we know how that could look in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And it's obviously interesting then as well whenever Mitchell Robinson comes back, whether that then our depth now is like Achua, McBride, Campaign, and I think Tyler Collick. I think they're kind of expecting him now to be able to play some sort of role as a rookie. And then when Mitch comes back, you're kind of looking at either Mitch or Hart coming off the bench, McBride, Payne, Chua, Collick then. So unfortunately, I can't help the fear kind of taking over a little bit, thinking we're giving Tibbs a chance to be Tibbsy with minutes, which obviously we don't really want to see. We're giving him more of a reason to be like that. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But they're definitely putting expectations on, I think, Achua and McBride to really have big years, which
Yeah.
I think they're both capable of doing. But the pressure is definitely on them to really deliver throughout the regular season and in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're ready. I think Miles McBride is absolutely ready. I mean, Deuce is the moments he had in the playoffs, I think showed us all like he's the guy that's going to continue to get better under pressure. You'd love to see that from your young guys. And everything we saw from Achua, I'll keep raving about it. I love the energy brought. It's exactly
Yeah.
what the Knicks like want from a guy like him. And he's just still has so much untapped potential. So they got guys that are our next man up mentality that I think they're going to be okay. And luckily, we won't have to talk question marks on whether Jericho Sims should be, you know, playing the starting five this season at all. You don't have to deal with that.
Yeah,
But I
that's a
think,
nice little divot there. We don't have to worry about that.
yeah, I think you can put this all on a nice bow and just say the Knicks got a lot better. And I think the Knicks are they're done being cute. They were done being cute when they made the Mikal Bridges trade.
Mm-hmm.
They were done being cute before that. You know, healthy Knicks team. How does that look against the Celtics? I think there a lot of people are going to say, you know, they take them to 6, take them to 7. But this healthy Knicks team, this is something to talk about. Like that, this is truly approaching like a. I mean, how many tiers of championship contenders do we have right now with the parity we have in the league? But they're right there with the Celtics. They're close. They're really close, and we just got to see what it looks like throughout the regular season. We got to see, you know, can Cap, you know, stay on the floor as a 5? That's one thing we have to address. But it's just the little things like that, and obviously the little things are going to lead to the ultimate outcome in the playoffs. But man, like this has got to be the most exciting time as a Knicks fan for New York. Like there's no there's no moment I can think of in the last decade where you go into a season thinking we are actually like really geared up to compete for a championship.
Nah, this is it's unbelievable. It's great for the city. I mean, last year we were made to believe again. And like now this summer they've kind of taken it to the next level, saying it's not just about
Mhm.
believing. Now it's about we're gonna go and do it. And
Yeah,
that's always great to see when you're a fan of a franchise.
yeah. And we got to flip to the other side. So in Minnesota, they are. It seems news are a little bit quiet for a team that just made this trade. Like you'll hear every angle for how Cat's going to transform the Knicks, how maybe he's not as good as we think that he's going to be for the Knicks, and all in all, there's just like an firestorm of news. But for Minnesota, there's not a lot of art, and not a lot of people are talking about it. And I think that there's a good reason for it. Let's just start with the boring. This is my take on it. I think that for the Timberwolves, they are kind of a victim here of the CBA. They're a
Yeah.
victim of the CBA. They ultimately, I think, had to make this deal financially because they could not hold on to the depth around Anthony Edwards and Gobert without getting rid of Cat. They don't get rid of Cat, they ultimately have to get off of Nikhil Alexander Walker, Naz Reid, 2 guys who are not just like depth guys for them. They are like star role players for them. The contributions that they had, they would not be in the playoffs without players like that on their team. And ultimately, that's an important question to ask now. So they had to make that decision because of the CBA, but was it the right decision? You tell me.
Yeah. It's never nice when you know a team has to make a decision financially rather than about actually winning and actually stuff on the court. So I don't want to get too much into it, but yeah, it's obviously being a fan of a franchise like we've seen with the Nuggets, like knowing that the team makes a decision based off what they might end up losing rather than how much they can focus on just winning on the basketball court. So that's a really tough side of this for the Timberwolves. But there's part of me that thinks this deal could work. There's part of me that
Yeah.
thinks Randall can work in Minnesota, and I'm. It's so interesting to see some of the angles people taking. Basically, like, oh, the Timberwolves have completely thrown Ant under the bus, getting worse in his prime. How could they break up this team after they're probably the second best year of the entire franchise's history? I get that side of it, but flexibility is important. They've got a little bit more flexibility now. I think there's a chance Randall could resign or even just pick up his player option. So that could even become this could even become a 2 year rental rather than a 1 year rental, or they
Yeah,
could even move him again. I'm not sure when he becomes eligible to be moved again. I'm not sure. That's probably around the December mark or something like that. I'm not sure how long you have to wait after trading for a guy at this stage. But Randall is a very good basketball player. And yes, he doesn't have the 3 point shooting of Karl Anthony Towns. But if you compare them in terms of just general scoring, they're pretty much equal. It, obviously, Cap has the advantage shooting wise. Randall's a better playmaker. Randall's a better shot creator. Pretty equal at rebounding, especially at the four spot. Randall might even be better in terms of rebounding from the four spot. Rim protection, obviously, you got to give the edge to Cat. But fit wise, I think the potential is there for Randall to slot in seamlessly. Defensive wise, obviously, doesn't have the size of Cat,
yeah,
but more
more
traditional
versatile for
for us,
sure. Yeah,
he can guard just fine. So I like the idea of this. I think there's more worry if Randall was under contract and he was on a more generous deal, obviously, than Cat is. If he was under contract for maybe 2 or 3 years, I feel like people would be more accepting of this. I think people are a little bit worried that they're only going to get a 1 year rental out of Randall and that we're not going to see the best. But then you're also like, these are the same people that were like, oh, the Knicks getting Randall back is like getting a new player for them. He's going to make all the difference for the Knicks. Then he's traded to the Timberwolves. They're like, oh my God, the Timberwolves are so much worse. Like, it's just amazing the way these
I know
deals like
it.
make people react.
Yeah, I think the angle I gotta take with this is like the question I was actually asking is in terms of like not just the money but the depth. So Gil Alexander Walker and Reed, and I think you probably agree with me that if you really look at what they're up against and what you're trading Cat for, not directly but the opportunity cost, keeping Cat means you lose Gil Alexander Walker and Reed, and trading him means you get to keep those guys and you get to do a little experiment with Randall, and you get Donte DiVincenzo, who we already said maybe you're buying high, but was one of the best 3 point shooters in the league.
And he's on
And
one of the best contracts in the league.
exactly. So I think a lot of this is not really about Randall because I think it's going to be a zero sum game when we start talking about the pros and cons of Randall. Because let's just talk about the pros. All things aside, I think this is all really about depth, and I would do that 100 times out of 100. When you look at the the construct of the Timberwolves, because this is all about Ant, and what you need around Ant is guys who function around him. Because I think he's a true number one, and Karl Anthony Towns is, in terms of just like allocating your assets appropriately throughout your roster, too expensive for a guy who's going to be second fiddle to a rising star in Anthony Edwards. And I think Cat can do more, but doing more means a little bit less there. So to lose all this depth for Cat wasn't worth it. Um, but let's just back up from that. Let's just talk about Randall. Randall offensively is going to answer a big need that they have in the playoffs. He is, because one issue they had is that you don't get enough creation from Anthony Edwards when he's getting double triple teamed. If they're staggering them a bit, you get another creator who's, like you said, he's improved a lot as a playmaker. I think that's something that Randall's not got enough credit for. Is he's passed out of double teams way better. His vision's got a little bit better to get it to the weak side corner, and 1-on-1, he knows how to kill matchups. Like, he's a guy that you're going to throw the ball to, get him a good matchup he likes. He's going to go to work and he's get you a bucket. And sometimes you need that. Like, that is a lot of times that they did not have that on the floor when Ant wasn't creating. There just wasn't enough offense. They would get in these spells of they're playing crazy good defense, they're scoring the fast break, but then when it slows down and Ant doesn't have it going, Mike Conley's not at that aging. He's not really going to do that. And yeah, you draft Rob Dillingham to think about, all right, we need another guy, but Rob Dillingham could be 2 years away.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's really good this year, but he needs the NBA body. He needs to get used to the flow of the NBA game. You just got a guy could drop 26 points a game, not really having a lot of off ball shooting or anything like that. He's doing that without volume 3 point shooting. So there's a positive, and I think that's something that the T-Wolves fans can be excited for is giving another guy next to Ant who could create legitimately.
Yeah, and that's such a big part of what you need in the playoffs. Like that was just such a big hole that was left in the Knicks team last year. Like we needed a secondary shot creator, and it just wasn't there. And the Timberwolves, they needed it as well. It's and also like you can make the argument like Naz Reid is a guy they really believe in. He could step up and fill the gap left by Karl Anthony
Sir.
Towns. Like he's capable of doing that. And like say if it's not really working with Randall and they can play you lineups where it's Naz Reid and Gobert. Like it's not like Randall is going to come in. Oh, they absolutely have to play him. Like I'm really excited about their depth now. You think
Yeah.
obviously starting five, Conley, Ant, McDaniels, Randall, Gobert. Then you got a bench of Dillingham, DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, Ingles if he still has a bit of juice left, Naz Reid, maybe Luca Garza finally finds some sort of place within this team as well. That would be just be a cherry on the top of the cake. But especially getting in DiVincenzo, that can provide that bit of cover for Dillingham if he's having a few rookie lulls that are to be expected. Having Donte there provides that extra bit of cover where you can still get rest for Mike Conley and there's not so much pressure on him to play regular season games, which I think is going to be really big for them.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is the depth behind him, that creation. And Reed, I want to get back to him real quick because a lot of people are a little bit like they don't like the comparison. A lot of Cat fans out there is Nas Reed is not Karl Anthony. He's not Karl Anthony. So I'll admit that. And yeah, I get a little bit too high on when Nas Reed is on the floor and Cat is not because it's undeniable to see how they impact the game similarly. And while Nas Reed doesn't do it to that same level, he doesn't have that same size. He's not able to like punish people in the post as much as Cat is. That's a massive part, that's different between them two. You're not going to get that back. You're not going to have a post presence except for Julius Randle on this team anymore. And that's, that inside out game that matters. You're not going to have that. Sure. But let's look at Nas's stats. Without Cat on the floor, with Cat out rather, he averaged 17.3 points, 6.5 rebounds on over 40% from three. He shot better when he was playing, when Cat was there, and 48% from the floor. He is still a bench guy. He is not a starter. He is not going to slot in as your starting four. Obviously, that's Julius Randle's job. But Nas Reed taking up more of that role as your main stretch big. Like he's a guy that, buy low right now because he's going to be a guy that's really going to step up and continue to provide that same level of play. But what do we think though about the offensive end for Gobert and Randall? Because this could be the most disastrous effect of the trade. And disastrous meaning like you go into the playoffs and you see what happened 2 years ago. You see those flashes of Gobert just getting played off the floor. Defense is not respecting him, and then you put another big next to him who can't really shoot. That is something that could spell a very quick end to this experiment if Julius Randle doesn't have a magically good shooting year like he had the other year, and defenses just don't have to respect him. Because ultimately, what do we want for Anthony Edwards? We want him to have another guy who can create next to him. That's a massive problem. To just have a guy like Cat or Nas Reed who aren't going to create a lot from the perimeter. Like you still need other guys who are going to do that. But if this means that his lanes are going to close in even more than they were before, because it's a massive downgrade. Like it's a several tiers difference of the shooters that Randall is and Cat is. Like that is something that concerns me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you get Dante in who can like cover that, but that's from the bench and from a different position. So it's not gonna just instantly replicate in the same way. Yeah, there is pressure on Randall. He has been very much an up and down 3-point shooter. So obviously he had one big year where he shot 40%. Then the next year he on his highest volume, I think was 2 years ago, he shot 8.3 threes a game, 34%. Then last year he was back down to low 30%. They really need him to be shooting around the 37-38 mark at a similar volume to Cat, which I wouldn't rule out. Like I think if he's shooting 5.5 maybe a game, I wouldn't rule out him being able to make 37-38% of those. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but it is a gamble that they kind of need to pay off.
Yeah, and it's a gamble that every defense in the league is going to take. Because would you rather close in a lane around Anthony Edwards who's going to score for three guys, or are you gonna let Julius Randle shoot and hope that he misses? You're gonna easily take the latter. So it's gonna be interesting how they make this work. They're gonna have to have him a lot more active in actions. He can't be standing still. There cannot be any standstill Julius Randle on this team at all. and he's going to need to be really active and especially punish teams in the break. And you hope that he's energized by this, I think, is probably the most important piece of this, is what kind of Julius Randle are you getting? What energy are you getting from him? And he's an energy guy. He's going to feed off of what his role is, and the energy of the team, energy of the crowd. Is Minnesota going to welcome? Is this going to be a place where he's going to be valued? And I hope that's the case, because we know what that level of Julius Randle looks like. That's an all-star level player. That's
Yeah,
a guy who's going to contribute to big winning.
they need to buy in on him. The crowd, like the franchise as a whole, really needs to buy into Julius Randle and give him an honest shot, because he's effectively playing in a contract year, because next summer there are very few teams, if any, that are going to have any cap space to be able to offer him a big deal. That's why I'm kind of thinking maybe he'll pick up his player option. But he's in a position where he's got to prove it. He's also got to be reinvigorated, because it's not like he's getting dumped off to a team that aren't in playoff conversation or on the outskirts
Yeah.
of the playoffs. This is a team that are expected to be a top 4 seed in the Western Conference and competing for the NBA championship. So I think the blend could be right there, as long as Randall's head is right, as long as the franchise and the fan base really embraces him like New York did, and look what we got out of him. He is a very capable basketball player. Yeah, there's obviously the risk, like we were talking with the 3-point shooting, the potential. There's still times where he holds onto the ball a little bit too long. Is he going to legitimately buy in being the second fiddle to Anthony Edwards? That's another element that we have to see. But
I
I
think
think
yes.
people like,
I want to answer that though, because I think
yeah,
a lot of people are talking about that. Jalen Brunson came in and he quietly accepted Jalen Brunson as the lead guy. That was pretty odd. Like, where was the sulking? Where was the complaining? Where was the demanding? Like, we didn't see that. He played his role. He played his role. He's like, and he still played what he's like. No one's talking about the fact that he averaged 26 points a game this season. Like that's just completely lost in the noise of him getting injured and the Knicks doing all these cool stuff without him. And it's sad to see, because he did that as, like 1B to Jalen Brunson. So I think he absolutely can do that with Edwards. And sorry to like veer you off track here, but what I have to think about too in terms of Edwards, and we're thinking about how he's going to defer to that. I think their energies match very well. I mean, a lot of what we see on the floor is chemistry, and how can these guys really gel together beyond what their skills are on the floor. And I think that they have that same kind of vibe. And Kat and Ant are friends off the court, and Ant's a big defender of Kat, and they've had a great relationship. But I think that ferocity, that intensity, that like physicality, that beast that you see in Anthony Edwards, that is something that you get from Randle as well. And I think they're going to feed off of that. Like, they're going to feed off of each other's play. And yeah, it could go one of two ways. Maybe they're like really headstrong players, and and is very outspoken and willing to speak his mind, and maybe that's going to rub Randle the wrong way. Or that level of intensity is going to be a major part of the identity of this team, that they feed off of that. This team really feeds off that defensive energy, and if Randle's buying in on that end as well, like that is something that I think could add to the character of this team beyond what Cat could do.
yeah, I totally agree. Like, mainly my point I want to make is, like, I don't want to hear all this about how the Timberwolves have gotten worse, how the Timberwolves are not doing they're not doing right by Anthony Edwards and all this sort of crap. I think this trade has very much got the possibilities of being win-win for both teams. Timberwolves can still be a top 4 seed in the West next year. The Knicks are still in a position to really challenge the Celtics in the East next year. And that's the perfect thing when you trade an all-star for an all-star. That's what you get. And also, we mentioned the depth side of that for Minnesota as well. There is no major drop off for either team here, and anyone who thinks otherwise without actually having seen it on the court is just crazy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we have to think about this is beyond the player for player. This is beyond just getting Donte in as well. When you're evaluating this trade, you have to think about the fact that if they kept Cat, they would not be able to keep Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid. You can debate about how useful you think they are. Timberwolves clearly value them and think that they are way, way too important to just let go. So in reality, this is a trade not just for the experiment of Randle and for the shooting expertise of Donte DiVincenzo, but to keep their two guys who have obviously demonstrated they fit alongside Ant and have contributed to playoff winning. That's important to them. So that they blame the CBA then, honestly, if this is such a tragedy, which I think that we've been talking about a Cat trade for 2 years now. And I think it's a different context now because they figured things out last year. I mean, maybe this is a good time to talk about that, actually. Is if this trade happened a couple years ago, when we joked about, the Gobert trade and then now they're going to trade Cat next, it would have made more sense. It would have been like, see, like it didn't work there. But I think this is a good time to congratulate Karl Anthony Towns and the Timberwolves for fixing what looked like a disaster. Not only did they fix what looked like a disaster from the season before to last, but they turned it into almost a finals appearance.
Yeah.
They were on the cusp of being in the NBA finals after having a year where it looked like they had made one of the worst trades in NBA history, when it looks like they were completely destroying a team around a rising star in the NBA. Instead, that NBA star rose. Karl Anthony Towns figured it out. Gobert another defensive player of the year. They're one of the best. They were the best defense in basketball in the same year where the Boston Celtics were destroying one of their defense as well. Like they deserve a round of applause for what they did last season. And I think also maintaining that level of commitment to building their team I think is what is being shown here. It's not about the money and not wanting to pay up. It's not about not valuing Ant's future. I think it's the opposite. I think you got to applaud them for being aggressive and not just keeping Cat around and sitting on their hands. They knew they had to do something to keep this team together and keep depth around Ant and valuing Ant. And I think it's exactly why they made this trade.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like it's obviously, yeah, you make the argument that obviously a little bit less size, maybe a slight downgrade on talent. I'm not sure if I'm totally sold on that line of it. That I get that, but at the same time, they've got elite depth. They've still got a hell of a lot of talent around their budding superstar who only needs so much talent. That's how good I think Anthony Edwards is. There's a certain, like, he doesn't need that like elite 2-star. Like he doesn't need his like Devin Booker or his Anthony Davis. I really don't think that Ant needs that level of superstar beside him. I think if he's got great defense, great shooting, and like a guy like a Randle around him, I think that's enough for him to be able to carry a team and still have them as legitimate competitors. So as a Timberwolves fan, you're like, yeah, obviously disappointing when you break up a team that did so well last year, one of the best years in franchise history. But then on the flip side, you got to remember this is a small market team. They're in a dispute about the ownership at this moment.
Yes,
they cannot afford to take $100 million hit. They were going to lose $100 million if they had kept Cat for this season even before a luxury tax on top of that. So you have to, unfortunately, you got to take the business side a little bit too, which obviously I know that absolutely hurts. And I hate that has to be a part of basketball decisions, but what they've got in return is better than I think you really could have expected in terms of what you were going to get for Cat, especially being in a position where they almost needed to move him as well.
Yeah, another win-win trade, I think. Not a lot of them over the years, but I think we've had a few the past couple seasons, and I think this will be chalked up as one of them. I think both teams will thrive, and I think the last piece of this that is going to be so interesting to look back on is we look back at some star-studded power forwards who were drafted and played for the Minnesota Timberwolves, namely Kevin Garnett, traded to the Boston Celtics, wins a championship. Kevin Love, one of the greatest big man shooter of all time, gets traded to the Cavs, wins a ship with LeBron James. And now we have Karl Anthony Towns, arguably the best big man shooter of all time, traded to the New York Knicks, who has waited over 3, 4, how many decades is it now, for a championship in that city?
Yeah, it's over 470, 73.
Will this be the next in line for a former Timberwolves big to win a championship soon after being traded? Because we'll have to find out.
Please God Almighty. Hey man, all I say is, yeah, I hope that's the outcome, but we just gotta wait and see. I'm excited. I'm still so super excited about my Knicks, and I'm still really excited about the Timberwolves ahead of next year. It's gonna be really interesting to see the flow of both these teams. Obviously, nice getting it done before training camp. You can sometimes forget how short training camp is. Like you're kind of a few days of training, and then you're straight into games, and then it's the regular season. It's it's not like football training camp, which seems to go on forever. The basketball is pretty much right. Couple of days of training, right? Games, okay, regular season, let's go. But
yeah, our first preseason game is Friday.
Yeah.
Celtics and Nuggets. We got Timberwolves and Lakers. That is a lot sooner than I realized.
Yeah. Straight out the bat. I wonder, will Randle be in the lineup then? Maybe. So we won't say real minutes, but yeah, it might be fun to see him out there against one of his former teams. But damn, I like this trade. Kind of came out of the blue. I think after the Bridges trade, I don't think anyone really believed that this trade was going to happen. But this has been kind of a slightly murmured rumor, probably over for like the last like year and a half. I'd say maybe especially since they extended Naz Reid, that's when we definitely knew that Cap almost definitely had to go. And then the links to the Knicks were kind of always there. Obviously, has the connection to Leon Rose. Obviously, grew up in New Jersey, so it's kind of like a return home for him. So let's hope it works out as well as it did with Jalen Brunson, and then we'll be really cooking with fire then.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to get into all the preseason action we get to see, especially the Nuggets. We'll see if their young guys have changed at all, if they're going to be valued parts of this franchise we've talked about all summer. Celtics, we'll see who they are bringing out there. But at any rate, I think this is the last trade we'll talk about in the offseason before we see you for what is officially the preseason next episode.
Yeah, I mean it comes around quick. You're kind of waiting around forever for it to come back, and then all of a sudden it's there. It just starts, and then boom, we're straight back into it, and that's why you gotta love October.
We are
Sports
so
in October,
back, baby.
Sports in October it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But yep, Cats and Nick, Donte and Julius Randle are Timberwolves. Let's see how that goes. But for now, gonna call it quits. That's gonna do it for today's episode. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you all so much for listening. Remember, we're everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.